I never thought I'd be desperate enough to take a job driving a school bus. But after the factory in Milford, Connecticut closed down and took my supervisor position with it, I was left scrambling to cover my mortgage. 3 months of unemployment later, my savings dwindling faster than autumn leaves, I spotted the listing. School bus driver needed, Maplewood Academy, competitive pay, immediate start. The interview was strangely brief. Mrs. Winters, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses that magnified her pale blue eyes to an unsettling size, barely glanced at my resume. Instead, she studied my face with uncomfortable intensity, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. The office smelled of old books and something else I couldn't place, something medicinal and sharp. Route 17 has been difficult to staff, she finally said, sliding a folder across her desk. The previous drivers didn't follow protocol. I nodded, desperate enough not to ask questions. I'm good with rules, ma'am. Excellent. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You'll start Monday. Bus number 37 will be yours. It's particular. When I opened the folder in my car, expecting employment paperwork, I instead found a handwritten list titled Route 17, Mandatory Protocols. At first, I thought it was a joke, some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. But something about Mrs. Winters' demeanor, that clinical assessment in her oversized eyes, made me think twice. The list contained 13 rules, each more bizarre than the last. 1. Start the bus exactly at 6:17 a.m., no earlier, no later. Speak the words, Route 17 begins, before turning the key. If the engine doesn't catch on the first try, exit the bus immediately and count to 17 before trying again. 2. Never arrive at a stop before the designated time. If you're early, circle the block or pull over, but never stop within sight of the designated pickup location. 3. Do not acknowledge any child wearing a yellow raincoat at any stop. They are not on your roster. They were never on your roster. 4. If the radio turns on by itself, turn it off immediately. If it plays children's laughter, pull over at the next safe spot, exit the bus, and walk around it 3 times counterclockwise while whistling. 5. At the Merson Road stop, 7:23 a.m., verify that exactly 3 children board. If a 4th approaches, close the door and proceed immediately to the school. 6. If any child leaves items behind on the bus, report books, lunch boxes, and clothing to the lost and found. If you find drawings, teeth, or small animal bones, place them in the glove compartment without looking at them directly. 7. Do not respond to any comments from the Willow Street twins. If they speak to you directly, blink 3 times and think of running water. 8. After all children have exited at the school, close the doors and count backward from 17. Do not start the engine until you finish counting, regardless of any noises you may hear. 9. If you pass St. Michael's Cemetery on your route, you shouldn't, and see children playing among the headstones, do not slow down. Do not make eye contact. 10. On Wednesdays, take Orchard Lane to reach Merson Road, even though it appears to be a longer route. Do not deviate from this path, regardless of what you may see on alternative routes. 11. If you see the White House on Orchard Lane, you shouldn't. Do not acknowledge the woman on the porch. She is not pointing at you. She is pointing at what's behind you. 12. If a child boards with wet shoes on a sunny day, move them to the front seat nearest to you and do not let them sit elsewhere. 13. If a wooden token appears in your possession, do not lose it. Each represents a day you have successfully completed the route. When you have 7, place them in the glove compartment in a circle. This completes your probation. I almost marched back into the office to question it, but then I saw the salary, nearly double what I'd expected. My mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. I tucked the list into my jacket pocket and drove home, telling myself it was probably just some eccentric private school nonsense. Rich people always had their quirks. Maybe some of the kids had special needs, or there were custody issues I didn't understand. That night, I dreamed of yellow buses with teeth where headlights should be. I woke up sweating at 3:17 a.m. exactly, my bedside clock's red digits burning in the darkness. As I reached for the water glass on my nightstand, I noticed something under it. A small wooden token, like a chess piece, carved into the shape of a child with no face. I don't remember leaving it there. I don't remember having it at all. Scene 1 Monday morning came with heavy rain and a sense of dread I couldn't shake. I arrived at the bus depot at 5:45 a.m., clutching my coffee thermos like a lifeline. In the dim fluorescent light of early morning, bus number 37 waited in the last spot of the lot, separated from the others by an empty space on either side. It was older than the rest of the fleet, its yellow paint dulled to the color of jaundiced skin. As I approached, I could have sworn I saw movement behind the windows, like shifting shadows despite no one being aboard. "She's temperamental," said a voice behind me, making me jump and splash hot coffee on my hand. The mechanic, Dave according to his name patch, stood wiping his hands on a rag. His left eye was milky with cataracts, and he smelled strongly of cigarettes and something metallic. "Just follow the rules," he said, handing me the keys, "and you'll be fine." "What happens if I don't?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dave's good eye met mine, his expression unnervingly serious. "Then you won't be driving Route 17 anymore. Nobody ever does it twice if they don't follow the rules." As I climbed aboard and settled into the driver's seat, I pulled out the list of instructions and read the first one again. Start the bus exactly at 6:17 a.m., no earlier, no later. Speak the words, "Route 17 begins," before turning the key. If the engine doesn't catch on the first try, exit the bus immediately and count to 17 before trying again. I check my watch. 6:14 a.m. The rain drummed harder on the metal roof as I waited, the sound like impatient fingers tapping. "Route 17 begins," I muttered at exactly 6:17, feeling foolish as I turned the key. The engine caught with a throaty rumble that seemed too powerful for such an old vehicle. The vibration traveled up my spine, settling as a dull ache at the base of my skull. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically as I navigated through Milford's quiet morning streets. The first stop on my list was Oak Ridge Lane, where I was scheduled to arrive at 6:32 a.m. According to my route sheet, I'd be picking up 3 children there: Emma Larson, grade 4, Tyler Larson, grade 6, and Zachary Morton, grade 5. I was running a couple minutes early, so I slowed down, recalling rule number 2. Never arrive at a stop before the designated time. If you're early, circle the block or pull over, but never stop within sight of the designated pickup location. Rain pounded the roof as I pulled into a convenience store parking lot to wait. The digital clock on the dashboard read 6:29 when I noticed a small face peering through the store window at me. A child with dark hair plastered to their pale forehead. They didn't blink, just stared directly at the bus. I raised my hand to wave, and the child pressed their palm against the glass, leaving a foggy handprint that seemed too large for their small frame. When I checked again, they were gone, and the handprint had disappeared as well. At exactly 6:32, I pulled up to the Oak Ridge Lane stop. 3 children waited under umbrellas, a blonde girl who must be Emma, an older boy with the same blonde hair, and a brown-haired boy with thick glasses. Their parents watched from a minivan parked nearby, engine running, headlights illuminating the rain. "Good morning," I called as they boarded. "I'm Mr. Barrett, your new driver." The children nodded politely, but said nothing as they filed past. I noticed they all tapped the 3rd step twice before proceeding to their seats, something that wasn't mentioned in my rules. I made a mental note to ask about it later. The next stop was Willow Street at 6:47 a.m., where I'd pick up 2 more students. As I drove, I glanced occasionally in the rearview mirror. The 3 children sat perfectly still, their umbrellas closed but completely dry, despite the downpour they'd been standing in. Willow Street was in an older part of town, with Victorian houses set back from the road behind iron fences. I pulled up at exactly 6:47. No children waited at the stop, but I remembered my instructions to wait at each designated stop, even if no one appeared to be waiting. I watched the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. At the 2-minute mark, movement caught my eye. From between 2 houses, a small figure darted across a front yard, then another. 2 girls in notching red raincoats appeared suddenly at the curb, as if they'd materialized from the mist. Their faces were obscured by their hoods, but I could see identical black Mary Jane shoes beneath their coats. They boarded silently, tapping the 3rd step twice like the others had done. As they passed, I caught a whiff of something sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit. One of them turned slightly toward me, and beneath her hood, I glimpsed a flash of 2 white teeth in what might have been a smile. "Good morning," I said. Neither responded as they moved to the back of the bus. The next few stops proceeded similarly. Silent children boarding with practiced precision, each tapping the 3rd step, none speaking to me or each other. By 7:15, I had picked up 12 students, and the bus hummed with the strange energy of their collective silence. The rain had intensified, drumming against the roof and windows, making the world outside a gray blur. I approached Merson Road, the final residential stop, before heading to the school. The rule about this stop had struck me as particularly odd. At the Merson Road stop, 7:23 a.m., verify that exactly 3 children board. If a 4th approaches, close the door and proceed immediately to the school. I pulled up at precisely 7:23. 3 children stood at the stop, 2 boys and a girl, all around middle school age. They boarded in the same fashion as the others, and I did a quick count of my passengers. 15 now, exactly the number on my roster. As I prepared to close the door, movement in my periphery caught my attention. Through the rain, a small figure in a yellow raincoat approached from down the street, moving with an odd, lurching gait. I remembered rule number 3. Do not acknowledge any child wearing a yellow raincoat at any stop. They are not on your roster. They were never on your roster. The figure drew closer, and I could now see that the yellow raincoat was stained and discolored in places with what looked like mud or something darker. A hood obscured their face completely. My hand hovered over the door control as I battled my conscience. The children already on board had gone completely still. The silence was absolute, not even the sound of breathing or shuffling feet. Just the rain and the blood pounding in my ears. The figure was 10 feet away now. 5 feet. I could see small, muddy handprints on the front of the raincoat, as though someone with dirty palms had grabbed at it repeatedly. I made my decision and slammed the door shut, jamming my foot on the accelerator. The bus lurched forward, and in the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of the yellow-coated figure standing perfectly still in the road, hood now tilted up toward me. A small, pale hand emerged from one sleeve, raising slowly to wave goodbye. My hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way to the school. Maplewood Academy loomed ahead, a sprawling brick building with oddly shaped wings that seemed to jut out at unnatural angles. In the heavy rain, it appeared more like a crouching beast than a school. The clock on my dashboard read 7:42 a.m. as I pulled into the designated drop-off area, right on schedule. I parked in the designated bus lane, facing east as my instructions specified. I turned off the engine but left the key in the ignition, waiting for the hall monitor I had been told about. I spotted a thin woman in a red cardigan standing under the awning, clipboard clutched to her chest. Her gray hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin, giving her features a mask-like quality. She raised her hand and made a circular motion, apparently the signal I was waiting for. As I opened the doors, the silence broke. The children stood in perfect unison, arranging themselves in the aisle by grade without a word being exchanged. They filed out methodically, each nodding to the hall monitor, who checked off names on her clipboard without looking up at their faces. The last student to exit was a 6th grade boy with sandy hair. As he reached the steps, he turned back to me, his eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. "You did good today, Mr. Barrett," he said, his voice surprisingly deep for a child. "But tomorrow will be harder." He smiled, revealing a chipped front tooth, then hopped down the steps and jogged toward the school entrance. I sat stunned for a moment before remembering rule number 8. After all children have exited at the school, close the doors and count backward from 17. Do not start the engine until you finish counting, regardless of any noises you may hear. 17, 16, 15. I began, my voice sounding thin in the empty bus. At 10, a scratching noise started somewhere behind me, like fingernails dragging slowly across metal. 9, 8, 7. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. 6, 5, 4. Something thumped heavily in the back of the bus. 3, 2, 1. As I finished, the noises ceased abruptly. The silence felt heavy, expectant. I started the engine with trembling hands and pulled away from the school, following my route sheet back to the bus depot. The rain had finally stopped, but a thick fog had settled over the town, reducing visibility to just a few yards ahead. The roads seemed different somehow, longer, with unfamiliar turns that I was nevertheless certain were correct. When I finally reached the depot, Dave the mechanic was waiting, that same dirty rag in his hands. "How'd it go?" he asked, his milky eyes seeming to look through me rather than at me. "Fine," I lied. "Everything went according to procedure." He nodded slowly. "Good, that's good. She likes when the rules are followed." He patted the hood of the bus with unexpected tenderness. "The bus?" I asked. Dave just smiled. "Mrs. Winters wants to see you in her office. Evaluation of your first run." The administrative building was deserted when I entered, the hallways dimly lit despite the mid-morning hour. Mrs. Winters' office door stood ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling onto the worn carpet. She sat behind her desk, the same yellow legal pad in front of her, though I couldn't recall seeing her on the route. "Mr. Barrett," she said without looking up. I understand there was a situation at the Merson Road stop. My heart sank. I followed the protocol, I said quickly. When the yellow raincoat appeared, I didn't acknowledge it and drove away. After hesitating, she corrected, finally raising those magnified eyes to mine. For approximately 12 seconds, that's a very long time in certain circumstances. I swallowed hard. It won't happen again. No, she agreed. It won't. You've been reassigned to Route 17 tomorrow as well. Unusual for a new driver. The route seems to want you back. She smiled thinly. Few make it past the first day. The children seem to have taken a liking to you as well. I drove home in a daze, questions tumbling through my mind. Who was the child in the yellow raincoat? What had happened to the previous drivers who hadn't followed the rules? As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something on my front porch, a small yellow shape near the door. My heart hammered as I approached cautiously, keys clutched between my knuckles as a makeshift weapon. It was a child's raincoat, neatly folded, perfectly clean and new. On top of it sat a small wooden token, identical to the one I'd found on my nightstand. A faceless child, now joined by a second. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, punctuated by dreams of children with two wide smiles and a yellow school bus that breathed steam like a living thing. I awoke at 3:17 a.m. again, the same red digits glowing accusingly from my bedside clock. The wooden tokens, now there were 3, sat in a perfect line on my nightstand. I didn't remember moving the ones from the porch inside. I arrived at the bus depot at 5:45 a.m., just like the day before. The sky was clear, the pavement still damp from yesterday's rain. Bus number 37 waited in its spot, morning dew beating on its dull yellow surface. It looked ordinary enough in the strengthening daylight, just an aging school bus past its prime. Dave wasn't around, but someone had left a brown paper bag on the driver's seat. Inside was a thermos of black coffee and a package of powdered donuts with a note. For the road, you'll need the energy today. W. I settled into the seat, the vinyl cracking under my weight, and reviewed the list of rules while I waited for 6:17. Today, I'd need to take Orchard Lane to reach Merson Road, according to rule number 10. The idea made me uneasy, but the consequences of breaking the rules seemed far worse. At exactly 6:17, I spoke the words, "Route 17 begins," and turned the key. The engine caught with that same unnaturally powerful rumble, vibrating through the seat and into my bones. I pulled out of the depot, the rules folded in my pocket, their weight somehow heavier than paper should be. The morning proceeded with eerie similarity to the previous day. Children boarded silently at each stop, each tapping the third step twice, each taking their assigned seats without interaction. The mist had returned, not as thick as yesterday's fog, but enough to blur the boundaries between properties, making the suburban streets look unfamiliar and dreamlike. At the Willow Street stop, the twins in red raincoats boarded again. This time, as they passed, one whispered something that sounded like, "Yellow's coming." I remembered rule number 7. Do not respond to any comments from the Willow Street twins. If they speak to you directly, blink 3 times and think of running water. I blinked 3 times as instructed, focusing my mind on the image of a flowing stream. The road to the Merson Road stop seemed longer today, the houses on either side more dilapidated than I remembered. The trees loomed closer to the road, their branches occasionally scraping against the bus windows, with sounds like fingernails on glass. Rule number 10 specified, on Wednesdays, take Orchard Lane to reach Merson Road. even though it appears to be a longer route. Do not deviate from this path, regardless of what you may see on alternative routes. Today was Tuesday, not Wednesday, but the rule seemed to imply I should normally avoid Orchard Lane. Yet, as I approached the turn that would lead to my usual route, the steering wheel suddenly became rigid in my hands, refusing to turn. The bus seemed to be choosing its own path, guiding itself toward Orchard Lane despite my efforts. Orchard Lane was barely wide enough for the bus, with ancient apple trees forming a canopy overhead that blocked most of the morning light. The air inside the bus grew noticeably colder as we drove deeper into this natural tunnel. In the rearview mirror, I could see the children all staring straight ahead, their breath now visible in small clouds. About halfway down the lane, we passed an old white farmhouse set back from the road. It hadn't been there yesterday. I was certain of it. On the wraparound porch stood a woman in a long, old-fashioned dress, her hair covered by a bonnet despite the modern era. She raised her hand as we passed, not waving but pointing directly at the bus. Rule number 11 flashed in my mind. If you see the White House on Orchard Lane, you shouldn't. Do not acknowledge the woman on the porch. She is not pointing at you. She is pointing at what's behind you. Fighting every instinct, I kept my eyes forward and did not check the rearview mirror again until we had passed. When I did look back, both the house and the woman were gone, replaced by dense woods that should not have concealed something so large. We reached Merson Road at exactly 7:23 a.m. 3 children waited at the stop, different ones than yesterday, but still 2 boys and a girl. They boarded normally, and I did my count. 15 passengers, just like before. My eyes darted up and down the street, searching for any sign of a yellow raincoat. Nothing moved in the gray morning mist. I waited the required 3 minutes, then closed the door with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. As we pulled away, one of the boys from the stop leaned forward in his seat. "You're doing better than Mr. Kreider," he said matter-of-factly. He picked up yellow on his second day. We never saw him again. Before I could respond, the boy sat back, his expression blank as if he'd never spoken. The bus felt suddenly colder, and I noticed frost forming in delicate patterns on the inside of the windshield, despite the mild spring temperature outside. The rest of the route proceeded without incident, and I delivered the children to Maplewood Academy, exactly on schedule. The same hall monitor with the red cardigan gave the signal, and the children exited in great order just as before. After completing the countdown ritual and returning to the depot, I found Mrs. Winters waiting instead of Dave. She stood beside bus number 37's parking spot, her thin frame rigid, those magnifying glasses reflecting the morning light. "You took Orchard Lane," she said. Not a question. "The bus. It wouldn't let me turn. I tried to stay on the normal route." She nodded slowly. "The route is changing for you. Testing you." She handed me a small envelope. "For your collection." Inside was another wooden token, more detailed than the others. This one had 2 faces carved on opposite sides, one smiling, one screaming. "What happened to Yellow?" I asked suddenly. "The kids mentioned someone named Yellow who used to attend the school." Mrs. Winters's face hardened. "Rule number 3 exists for a reason, Mr. Barrett. That's all you need to know." She turned to leave, then paused. "Tomorrow is Wednesday. Take Orchard Lane as instructed, and be careful. The 3rd day is when most drivers encounter difficulties." That night, I found all 4 wooden tokens arranged in a square on my kitchen table when I returned from the bathroom. I was certain I'd left them scattered on the nightstand. As I reached out to touch one, the radio in my living room switched on by itself, playing a staticky version of a children's nursery rhyme. Rule number 4. If the radio turns on by itself, turn it off immediately. If it plays children's laughter, pull over at the next safe spot, exit the bus, and walk around it 3 times counterclockwise while whistling. But I wasn't on the bus now. The rules didn't say what to do in my own home. The music changed to the sound of children laughing. That same high, eerie laugh I'd heard in my dreams. I lunged for the radio and punched the power button. The laughter continued for several seconds after the radio was off, then faded slowly. When I turned back to the table, the tokens had rearranged themselves into a line pointing toward my front door. Outside, through the window, I could see a small figure in a yellow raincoat standing under the streetlight, face hidden by the hood, one hand raised in a wave. I closed the curtains quickly and spent the night with every light in the house blazing, afraid to close my eyes. The third day dawned with a thick blanket of fog that seemed to swallow all sound. I arrived at the depot early, driven there by restlessness rather than diligence. Bus number 37 sat waiting as always, but today there was something different about it. The headlights were on, glowing weakly in the fog like jaundiced eyes. I checked my watch, 5:38 a.m. The headlights shouldn't be on. No one should have been near the bus yet. As I approached, they flickered once, twice, then went dark. The door was closed, but I could have sworn I saw movement inside, a flicker of yellow near the back. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and climbed aboard. The interior was empty, but the air felt dense, charged with an expectant energy. On the driver's seat was another brown paper bag, this one containing a thermos of coffee and a small stack of buttered toast wrapped in wax paper. The note simply read, "Eat before you start. You'll need your strength." Prio. I ate mechanically, not tasting the food, my eyes constantly scanning the mirrors for any sign of movement. At exactly 6:17, I performed the starting ritual. The engine roared to life with unusual aggression, the entire bus shuddering as if eager to begin. The fog remained thick as I navigated to the first stop, forcing me to drive slowly. The world beyond the windows was a gray void, landmarks appearing and disappearing like apparitions. The children at each stop seemed to materialize from the mist itself, their forms solidifying only as they boarded the bus. I noticed something troubling as more students climbed aboard. Some of them appeared different today. 3 children from different stops had an odd translucence to them, their features slightly blurred, the seats visible through their bodies when the light hit them just right. I remembered rule number 12. If a child boards with wet shoes on a sunny day, move them to the front seat nearest to you and do not let them sit elsewhere. It wasn't sunny, but several children had inexplicably wet shoes despite the absence of rain. I moved them to the front as instructed, though none protested or even acknowledged the change. The radio clicked on as we approached Willow Street, playing static that rose and fell in patterns almost like speech. I quickly turned it off, remembering rule number 4. The twins boarded as usual, but today their red raincoats seemed darker, the color of congealing blood rather than bright cherry. "He's waiting at Merson," one of them whispered as they passed. "He knows you're breaking the pattern." I blinked 3 times and thought of running water as instructed, but my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Today was Wednesday, which meant I was supposed to take Orchard Lane to reach Merson Road, according to rule number 10. The thought filled me with dread, especially after yesterday's encounter with the White House that shouldn't exist. Nevertheless, I turned onto Orchard Lane deliberately this time. The ancient apple trees seemed closer together today, their branches intertwining overhead to form a tunnel that blocked out what little daylight penetrated the fog. The air temperature dropped noticeably, and I could see frost forming at the edges of the windshield. Halfway down the lane, the White House appeared again, looking older and more decrepit than yesterday. The woman on the porch wore the same old-fashioned dress, but her face was different, hollow-cheeked and gray, her eyes sunken. She pointed at the bus as we passed, her arm unnaturally stiff. Following rule number 11, I kept my eyes forward, not acknowledging her. But in my peripheral vision, I caught a glimpse of movement from the back of the bus, something shifting in the seat directly behind me that hadn't been there before. We reached Merson Road at exactly 7:23 a.m., despite the slower speed through Orchard Lane, as if time itself had compressed to ensure our punctuality. 3 children waited at the stop, but today, one of them wore a bright yellow jacket. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a raincoat, just a regular windbreaker. But the color? Was this a test? The rule specifically mentioned a yellow raincoat, not just any yellow garment. The 3 children boarded normally, including the one in the yellow jacket, who turned out to be a freckle-faced girl with pigtails. Nothing out of the ordinary, except for the color of her coat. I counted my passengers. 15, as it should be. As I prepared to close the door, I noticed a figure approaching through the fog, the unmistakable silhouette of a child in a hooded raincoat. Yellow. The temperature inside the bus plummeted instantly. The children fell completely silent, even those who had been whispering. The radio turned to static without being touched, and a sudden smell of overripe fruit filled the air. These were exactly the warning signs listed in the rules. Without hesitation, I slammed the door and accelerated away from the stop, my heart pounding. In the side mirror, I saw the yellow-coated figure raise both arms toward the departing bus, the gesture somehow more threatening than pleading. We arrived at Maplewood Academy without further incident, but as the children filed out in their usual orderly fashion, I noticed something alarming. There were only 14 of them. Somehow, between Merson Road and the school, we had lost a passenger. I frantically counted again as they exited. 14. I checked my roster. 15 names. Who was missing? As the last child stepped off, I remembered the countdown ritual from rule number 8. I closed the doors and began. 17, 16, 15. The scratching started earlier this time, at 14, and it was louder, more frantic. Trays, doys, a thump from the back of the bus. 10, 9, 8. The sound of something being dragged across the floor. 7, 6, 5. A child's giggle, high and unnatural. 4, 3, 2. The smell of overripe fruit returned, overwhelming. 1. Complete silence. I turned slowly in my seat, dreading what I might find. The bus appeared empty at first glance, but then I noticed something on the last seat. A small yellow raincoat, neatly folded, with a wooden token placed on top of it. With shaking hands, I collected both items, placing the token in my pocket and the raincoat in the glove compartment as instructed by rule number 6 for items left behind. When I returned to the depot, neither Dave nor Mrs. Winters was waiting. Instead, I found a note taped to the windshield. 4 tokens. 3 more days. The probation is almost complete. Yellow nose. W. That night, I arranged the 5 wooden tokens I now possessed on my kitchen table, the 4 I had collected plus the new one from the bus. As I studied them, I realized they formed a pattern, a sort of crude stick figure when arranged correctly. At 3:17 a.m., I awoke to the sound of my front door opening. I lay frozen in bed, listening to small, wet footsteps moving through my house. They stopped outside my bedroom door. A small puddle of water seeped underneath, followed by the unmistakable smell of overripe fruit. The doorknob turned slowly, and I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. The footsteps approached my bed, then stopped. I felt something cold and damp placed on my chest. Another wooden token. Then the footsteps retreated, and the front door opened and closed again. When I finally gathered the courage to open my eyes, I found the 6th token on my chest, carved with a tiny bus. Outside my window, the yellow raincoat hung from a tree branch, swaying gently in a breeze that wasn't there. Thursday morning greeted me with sunshine so bright it seemed almost mocking after the previous day's gloom. I arrived at the depot feeling like a sleepwalker, moving through the motions mechanically. Bus number 37 gleamed in the morning light, its yellow paint somehow brighter, newer looking. On the dashboard sat a paper bag containing breakfast and a note. One more day after today. Then, the choice. W. What choice? The rules mention nothing about a choice, only completing probation after collecting 7 tokens. At 6:17, I performed the starting ritual. The engine purred rather than roared today, a gentle rumble that was almost comforting. The day proceeded with unnerving normality. Children boarded at their stops, quiet but not unnaturally so. Some even exchanged whispers among themselves. No radio turned on by itself. No sudden temperature drops. No translucent students or wet shoes on this sunny day. Even the Willow Street twins were absent, a substitute driver picking them up for a dentist appointment according to a father waiting at the stop. As I approached the turnoff for Orchard Lane, I hesitated. Today wasn't Wednesday, so according to rule number 10, I should take my normal route. But after yesterday's events, I wasn't sure what normal meant anymore. I decided to follow the rule literally and bypassed Orchard Lane, taking the direct route to Merson Road. As soon as I made the turn, the sunny day vanished, replaced by thick, rolling fog that seemed to appear from nowhere. The temperature dropped sharply, and frost crawled across the windows in intricate patterns. From the back of the bus came a sound like someone slowly dragging their fingernails across the metal ceiling. The children sat rigidly in their seats, eyes forward, not acknowledging the noise or the sudden change in weather. We reached Merson Road at 7:23 exactly. The fog was so thick, I could barely see the stop sign, let alone any waiting children. I opened the door anyway, counting to 3 as I always did. Through the swirling mist, 3 silhouettes approached. As they boarded, I noticed with relief that they were the usual children from this stop. No yellow raincoats, no strange jackets, just normal kids with backpacks and lunch boxes. I was about to close the door when I noticed movement further down the road. A small figure emerging from the fog. My hand froze on the door control. It wasn't wearing yellow. Instead, this child wore a perfectly normal blue jacket and jeans. A boy of about 10 with neatly combed hair and glasses. Nothing threatening or supernatural about him at all. But he wasn't on my roster. I'd memorized every name, every face. My mind raced. The rules only mentioned yellow raincoats specifically. Nothing about other children who weren't on my roster. Was this an oversight? A test? The boy approached, smiling politely. "Good morning, sir. I'm new today." He held up a note with what appeared to be the school's letterhead. The children on the bus remained perfectly still. No temperature drop. No radio static. None of the warning signs listed in the rules. I made my decision. "Welcome aboard," I said, accepting the note. The boy smiled wider and stepped up, carefully tapping the 3rd step twice like all the others did. He took a seat near the front, and I closed the door, continuing on our route. When we arrived at Maplewood Academy, the hall monitor in the red cardigan was waiting as usual. But today, her expression was different. There was a tightness around her eyes, a subtle shift in her posture that radiated tension. She gave the signal, and the children began their orderly exit. When the new boy rose from his seat, she took a visible step back, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. The boy was the last to exit. As he reached the steps, he turned to me with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett. You've made a very important choice today." He hopped down and walked toward the school entrance. The hall monitor watched him go, her face pale. Then she turned to me, her expression now frantic. She mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, gesturing urgently toward the boys retreating back. I closed the doors and began my countdown ritual. 17, 16, 15. The bus remained silent. No scratching, no thumps, no giggles. 3, 2, 1. As I finished, there was a single soft tap on the outside of the door. I looked out to see the hall monitor standing there, her face ashen. I opened the door. "You let him on," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You broke the most important rule." "What rule?" I asked, confused. He wasn't wearing a yellow raincoat. "The rules aren't about raincoats," she said, her magnified eyes filling with tears. "They're about keeping them in, not letting them out." Before I could ask what she meant, she pressed something into my hand, a 7th wooden token. This one was carved into the shape of a key. "Mrs. Winters is waiting," she said, backing away. "May God have mercy on us all." When I returned to the depot, the parking lot was empty except for Mrs. Winters, standing beside bus number 37 space, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You've completed your probation," she said as I approached. 7 tokens, 7 days. "I don't understand," I said, holding out the tokens. "What are these for? What was that boy today?" "Not a boy," she said softly. "Not anymore." She took the tokens from my hand and arranged them in a perfect circle on the hood of the bus. "Route 17 isn't just a school bus route, Mr. Barrett. It's a boundary, a patrol. The children you pick up. Some of them are guardians. Some are prisoners. The rules help us tell which is which." "Prisoners?" "They're just kids." She smiled sadly. "Are they? Have you ever seen them eat, drink? Have you ever seen them do anything a normal child would do?" I thought back over the past days. The silence, the stillness, the perfect order. "Yellow is one who escaped long ago," she continued. "Keeps trying to get back in. The others, they're contained as long as we follow the rules. As long as we don't let new ones aboard who aren't on the roster. The boy today was not on your roster," she finished. "And now he's inside the school, inside our world." She placed the 7th token in the center of the circle. "The choice is yours now. Drive the route one more day and try to fix what you've done, or walk away knowing what you've unleashed." The tokens began to glow with a soft, amber light, the carved markings shifting and changing before my eyes. "What happens if I drive tomorrow?" I asked. "You'll have one chance to identify the imposter and remove him before the boundary seals at sunset. If you succeed, the balance is restored. If you fail..." She trailed off, looking toward the school in the distance. "Let's just say there won't be a Route 17 anymore. There won't be a Maplewood Academy. There might not be a Milford." The weight of her words settled over me like a physical burden. "And if I walk away, someone else will try. Someone else will fail. The boundary will collapse eventually. But it won't be your fault. Not directly. I thought of the children on my route, of the silent, orderly line filing off the bus each morning, of the boy with the chipped tooth who had warned me, of the twins in their blood-red raincoats. Were they prisoners or guardians, victims or jailers? "I'll drive tomorrow," I said finally. Mrs. Winters nodded, unsurprised. The route chose well. She gathered the tokens and handed them back to me. "Place these in the glove compartment before you start. Speak the words, 'The boundary holds,' instead of the usual phrase, 'The bus will take you where you need to go.'" That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the 7 tokens arranged before me, trying to make sense of it all. What was Maplewood Academy really? What were the children? And what had I unleashed by letting that boy board? At 3:17 a.m., I was awakened not by a sound, but by its absence. The usual nighttime noises, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the creaking of the house, had all gone silent. I opened my eyes to find my bedroom transformed. The walls had receded into darkness. The ceiling disappeared. I lay on my bed in what appeared to be the middle of Maplewood Academy's main hallway, moonlight streaming through high windows onto polished floors. At the end of the hall stood a figure in a familiar blue jacket. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Barrett," the boy said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "I've been trying to get back for so very long." "What are you?" I whispered. He smiled, his teeth gleaming too white, too sharp in the moonlight. "Just a child who wants to go to school. Just a child who wants to be with other children." His form rippled slightly, like heat rising from pavement. "Tomorrow I'll have so many friends, and you'll help bring them to me, won't you?" I blinked and was back in my bedroom, drenched in sweat, the 7 tokens now arranged on my chest in the shape of a bus. Friday dawned with unnatural stillness. No birds sang. No traffic sounds penetrated the morning air. Even the sunlight seemed muted, casting weak, watery shadows. I arrived at the depot clutching the 7 wooden tokens, their carved surfaces warm against my palm, despite the cool morning. Bus number 37 waited, its yellow exterior dull and peeling in places I hadn't noticed before. It looked tired, wounded somehow. There was no breakfast waiting today. No note from the mysterious W. Just an empty driver's seat and a sense of expectation that seemed to emanate from the vehicle itself. At exactly 6:17, I placed the tokens in the glove compartment as instructed and spoke the new words, "The boundary holds." The engine started with a sound like a sob, a pained, mournful noise that made my skin crawl. The usual route felt subtly wrong. The streets I'd driven for days now appearing longer or shorter than they should be, houses slightly out of place. At the first stop, no children waited, nor at the second, or the third. My unease grew with each empty stop. This wasn't right. There should be children. Silent, strange, possibly not even human children, but children nonetheless. At Willow Street, I finally found waiting passengers, the twins in their red raincoats. They boarded silently, tapping the third step twice as always. But today their movements were jerky, mechanical, like dolls being pulled by strings. "He's changing things," one of them whispered as they passed. "He's been waiting for so long." "How do I find him?" I asked, breaking rule number 7 without hesitation. The twins paused in perfect synchronization. "Follow the yellow," they said in unison, their voices overlapping in perfect harmony. "But be careful, he's not alone anymore." More children waited at subsequent stops, fewer than normal, all moving with the same jerky, puppet-like motions. By the time we reached Merson Road, only 7 children were aboard instead of the usual 12. At Merson Road, 3 children waited as always, but they were not the same ones as any previous day. These three were younger, around 6 or 7, all wearing identical gray sweaters with the Maplewood Academy emblem. As they boarded, I noticed their eyes, completely black, without whites or pupils. They moved to the back of the bus without tapping the third step. We arrived at Maplewood Academy at 7:42 exactly, though my route had been incomplete. The building looked different today, older, more decrepit, with dark stains spreading up the brick walls like moisture damage. The hall monitor wasn't waiting under the awning. Instead, Mrs. Winters stood there, her gray hair loose around her shoulders, her magnifying glasses missing so that her eyes appeared unnaturally small and recessed in her face. She gave the signal, and the children filed out, their movements still jerky and unnatural. Mrs. Winters counted them as they passed, her lips moving silently. When the last child exited, she approached the bus door. 10, she said. There should be 15. No one was waiting at most of the stops, I explained. Only the twins at Willow and 3 at Merson. Her face went slack with horror. He's already started. He's removing them from the route, from existence. She pressed something into my hand, a small golden key. Take this. Find the door with 7 locks in the east wing. The tokens will open 6. This opens the 7th. What's behind the door? The way out. For all of them. For us. Before he completes what he started. She stepped back, glancing nervously at the school. I can't go back in there. He knows me. But you're new. You might have a chance. What about the countdown ritual? I asked, clutching the key. No time, she said. He'll be ready by sunset, if you don't find him before then. She looked toward the town, visible in the distance. Milford won't exist tomorrow. None of this will. I pocketed the key and followed her gaze toward the school's entrance, where the last of the children were disappearing inside. Among them, I caught a glimpse of a blue jacket, the boy from yesterday. Inside, Maplewood Academy was a maze of dimly lit corridors and classrooms with closed doors. The air smelled of chalk dust and something else, that same overripe fruit odor I'd come to associate with wrongness. I headed for the east wing as instructed, passing classrooms where children sat in perfect rows, their movements synchronized as teachers who stood unnaturally still, mouthed words without making sounds. In one room, I spotted the Willow Street twins sitting side by side, their hands folded identically on their desks. They turned their heads in perfect unison as I passed, their eyes following me down the hall. The east wing was older, the floors creaking underfoot, the air heavy with dust and disuse. At the end of a long corridor stood a door unlike the others, made of dark wood with 7 ornate locks arranged in a circle. I removed the tokens from my pocket, studying their carved surfaces. Each seemed to correspond to a different lock. I inserted them one by one, each fitting perfectly, each turning with a satisfying click. 6 locks open, 1 to go. As I reached for the golden key, I felt a sudden chill at my back. I turned to find the boy in the blue jacket standing behind me, his smile too wide for his face. "You don't want to open that, Mr. Barrett," he said, his voice resonating oddly in the narrow space. "You don't know what's on the other side." "What are you?" I asked again. "I told you. Just a child who wants to go to school." His form flickered slightly, like a television with poor reception. "But I'm also so much more. I'm what was here before the school, before the town, before all of you." He took a step closer, and I could see now that his shoes left wet, black footprints on the wooden floor. "They trapped me," he continued. "The first driver and the woman you call Mrs. Winters. They built this place as a prison, disguised as a school. The children, some are guards, some are bait, some are just fuel. His smile widened impossibly. But now I'm free again, and once the sun sets, I'll remake this place as it was meant to be. I clutched the golden key tighter. And what happens to Milford? To the real children? He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. There are no real children here, Mr. Barrett. Haven't you figured that out yet? They're all like me. Different flavors of the same darkness. The bus route is the boundary of our prison, the daily patrol that keeps us contained. I thought of the silent, orderly children, the strange rituals, the rules that made no sense in a normal world. The driver who broke the rules before you let me create this form, the boy continued. Let me become this mask, but I'm so much more. He flickered again, his features momentarily replaced by something else. Something with too many eyes, too many mouths. I'm what waits between worlds, and tonight, my world comes back. In one fluid motion, I turned and jammed the golden key into the 7th lock, turning it with all my strength. The boy lunged forward with a howl that shook the corridor, his form elongating, hands stretching into clawed appendages. The door swung open, revealing not a room but a swirling vortex of light and shadow. Wind roared from the opening, pulling at my clothes, at the structure of the building itself. No! The boy screamed, his voice no longer childlike but a chorus of inhuman shrieks. You don't know what you're doing. The pull intensified, and I had to grab the door frame to keep from being sucked in. The boy wasn't so lucky. His form stretched and distorted as the vortex dragged him toward the doorway. He clawed at the floor, leaving deep gouges in the wood, but the force was too strong. As he passed me, his face reverted to that of the ordinary boy I'd picked up yesterday, fear replacing malice in his expression. Please, he begged, reaching out a hand that was once again just a child's hand. They lied to you. I'm not what they said. I'm just trying to go home. For a moment I hesitated. What if Mrs. Winters had deceived me? What if I was destroying something innocent? But then I remembered the rules. The careful, specific rules designed to maintain a boundary, to keep something in or out. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. The vortex pulled him through the doorway with a final, terrible scream. In its wake, the building began to shake, plaster falling from the ceiling, floorboards buckling. I slammed the door shut and turned the key, then ran down the disintegrating corridor toward the exit. Around me, classroom doors flew open, releasing floods of children, all running, all panicked, all suddenly acting like normal kids caught in a disaster. Outside, the sky had turned a sickening shade of green, clouds spiraling above the school like water down a drain. Mrs. Winters stood by bus number 37, frantically waving for me to hurry. We have to go, she shouted over the roar of wind and crumbling masonry. The boundary is collapsing. I ran for the bus, children streaming past me toward waiting parents who had appeared from nowhere, the orderly school pickup transformed into chaos. As I reached the bus, I noticed something clutched in Mrs. Winters' hand, a yellow raincoat, small enough for a child. You said the yellow raincoat was trying to get in, I gasped, pointing to it. Her expression shifted, becoming calculating. I said what you needed to hear. What would make you follow the rules? She handed me the coat. Some boundaries keep things in. Some keep things out. Route 17 did both. I took the wheel of bus number 37 one last time, Mrs. Winters beside me, as Maplewood Academy collapsed in on itself behind us. We drove away without looking back, the bus moving faster than should have been possible, the town of Milford blurring around us. Where are we going? I asked. "To find a new boundary," she replied, unfolding a map I'd never seen before. "A new route. The locks will hold for now, but not forever. There's always another driver needed. Always another Route 17. 1 year later, I sat in a coffee shop in a small town whose name doesn't matter, reading the local paper. A small headline caught my eye. "School district announces new bus route." I hadn't driven a bus since that day. Hadn't seen Mrs. Winters or Dave or any of the children from Maplewood Academy. After we'd escaped Milford, the bus had broken down in the middle of nowhere, steam pouring from its engine like a final breath. Mrs. Winters had simply walked away without a word, disappearing into the mist that seemed to follow her. I'd hitchhiked to the nearest town and started over. New name, new job, new life. But some things followed me. The wooden tokens appeared occasionally, on my nightstand, in my pocket, inside a new book. Never all 7 at once, just 1 or 2 as if to remind me. The yellow raincoat hung in my closet. I couldn't bring myself to discard it. And every morning at 6:17, no matter where I was or what I was doing, I found myself whispering, "The boundary holds," without knowing exactly why. The newspaper article was brief. A new school on the edge of town, a special route for children from outlying areas, a job opening for a driver willing to follow specific protocols. As I folded the paper, I noticed a woman watching me from across the cafe. Older, gray-haired, with glasses that magnified her pale blue eyes. She nodded once when our gazes met, then stood and walked out, leaving behind a yellow legal pad on her table. I waited until she was gone before approaching. On the pad was a list titled Route 23 Mandatory Protocols, followed by 13 numbered rules. Underneath, a handwritten note. "The locks won't hold forever. We need another driver, another boundary." I left the cafe without taking the list, determined to drive in the opposite direction of the new school. To run as far as possible from yellow buses and silent children and rules that made no sense. But as I reached my car, I found a wooden token on the driver's seat, carved into the shape of a key. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that Route 23 would find its driver. If not me, then someone else. Someone who needed money. Someone who was good at following rules. Someone who wouldn't ask what happened to the previous driver. The boundary always holds, until it doesn't. The elementary school in West Haven sits on a quiet street lined with oak trees. It looks perfectly normal. Brick building, playground, flagpole out front. But if you watch at the right time, you'll see something odd. Each morning, a yellow bus pulls up at exactly 8:17 a.m. The driver, a middle-aged woman with glasses, speaks words no one can quite hear before opening the doors. Children file out in perfect order, never speaking, never running like normal kids would. The locals know not to move to certain streets on the bus route. They've heard the stories about families who disappeared overnight. Houses left empty with breakfast still on the table. The school principal, a tall man with a milky left eye, keeps a collection of wooden tokens in his desk drawer. Sometimes, parents who ask too many questions about the special education program receive one in the mail. They usually move away shortly after. If you're new to town and see a child in a yellow raincoat waiting at a bus stop, keep driving. Don't offer a ride, no matter how heavy the rain, no matter how pitifully they wave. And if you're desperate for work and see a job listing for a school bus driver, make sure to ask the route number before applying. If it's an odd number, followed by an odd number that adds up to 17, walk away. Some rules exist for a reason. Some boundaries should never be crossed. I should know. I drove Route 17, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear the engine idling outside my window, waiting for me to begin another day, waiting for me to speak the words. The boundary holds. For now.